Hello, everyone, and welcome to Griplock, Foundation Disc Golf's weekly podcast. I'm Hunter, joined as always by Trevor, and we've got quite the show this week.
Yeah.
We got a lot to talk about going on in the disc golf world. We had Jonesboro last weekend, and we are currently in the midst of USDGC and WNC. I was about to say the one and only, but the two and only two majors, one for the MPO, one for the FPO field. The only majors we're going to see of 2020. So as of recording this, the MPO coverage is happening right now. The FPO coverage already happened, as it is pretty much only live right now.
Mm-hmm.
We watched the FPO coverage, so we'll talk some about that. And we watched the beginning of the MPO coverage, and then we're missing an hour of it to shoot this podcast. So you will see it tomorrow, Thursday. We should release it in the morning if you watch it right when it comes out, but we've only seen part of Wednesday's coverage. So we're not going to talk too much about the event score-wise or anything like that. But we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on at the event and coverage, and obviously some of the storylines that the Jonesboro Open brought up. So first and foremost, I want to go over some of the results from Jonesboro. We had Calvin taking it down by 1 over Paul in second, and then Double G coming in third. Over on the FPO side, we had an absolute dominant performance by Paige Pierce, taking her to a 13-stroke win over Katrina Allen second and Haley King third. And then on the dark horse picks, we had my boy Jeff Corns taking down, was it Zach Dumond? Is that who you had?
Yeah.
Zach Dumond.
Not his best weekend.
So first off, I want to talk through Calvin's performance. He had bookend 12 under pars. First round, he was tied with Paul at 12 down.
Mm-hmm.
Second round, I don't want to say he fell off, but I think he shot like a 7 or somewhere in there. He shot a middle-of-the-road round to allow Paul to take a 3-stroke lead.
Right.
And then the third round, he just came back out firing again.
Yeah.
What did you see in Calvin's game that kind of stood out that you think helped propel him to this win this weekend?
I mean, yeah, Calvin's just consistent. Like that's what makes him so good. I wouldn't categorize him as an overly aggressive player. For one thing, the moment certainly doesn't get to him. I mean, to be able to go toe-to-toe with Paul down the stretch and just hold him off is really hard to do. And because Paul did what he had to do coming down the stretch. I mean, I know he eagled, I think it was 14, and then got
I think Calvin.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah.
He answered it, right?
Yeah.
And so he also eagled a few down the stretch, or birdied a few down the stretch, rather. And, was just able to hold him off. And a lot of people can't do that. They get caught up in that moment when they're going toe-to-toe with the best in the game. I mean, what I've always noticed with Calvin is like putting, especially ice water in his veins.
Absolutely.
Nailed that putt on, was 17, right?
Nailed might be.
He made the putt. Regardless,
it was a baller move.
Yeah, it was a sick putt. And, he's just ice cold. Calvin, I've been on the Calvin train since the beginning since I joined this podcast, and I still think, marketability wise, that's one thing, but like you can't deny the dude is just good at disc golf. He's very much a robotic player. Like, he throws like the same shots over and over again, but they work very consistently. He doesn't do anything that shocks you as far as shot choices, but he consistently gets it done. And that's why I'm curious to see what he does at the USDGC, because it's a course where you stay in bounds and just execute, and you will play well.
Yeah, I mean, he's coming into it off of a very, very solid performance. Normally, in a tournament like this, I feel like on our podcast or just general disc golf talk, a lot of times this story is where Paul slipped up.
Right.
I personally, watching this event, I don't feel like Paul slipped up.
No, I mean,
I feel like Calvin just played that good.
Yeah, Paul could have played better. I mean, obviously, was 4 strokes worse than Calvin in that final round, but it certainly wasn't like, oh, Paul gave it away.
Exactly.
Calvin
took it.
Calvin took it for sure.
Yeah, and Calvin. Yeah. So, I think this just kind of showed that Calvin has reached that point where he's comfortable being there.
Right.
Comfortable being in that position for the win.
Yeah.
And has the instincts to keep his foot on the gas and get the win.
Calvin knows how to win. There's a lot of guys at the top of the game. Eagle's one I've said before. Like Eagle McMahon, it might be the best disc golfer on the planet as far as just straight up arm talent, but I don't really think he knows how to win yet. And that's something you can. Some guys just have that instinct. Some guys kind of have to figure it out. And I think Calvin knows how to win. Like he seems to have that killer instinct down the wire to be able to hold off good players, not get worked up, and put guys away, because that's ultimately you can be as good as you want. Because there are a lot of players who have a lot of arm talent and just don't quite have the mental capacity, like as far as staying in their game and, staying focused to close out tournaments and win. The game could look a lot different if more people were walking around with that Paul Macbeth or Calvin Heimberg mindset of just not letting anything get to them.
It's a tough skill set. You almost can't acquire it.
It's very difficult to learn.
It's something that you are just the way you were raised almost.
A lot of people are just kind of wired differently.
Yeah, and I think Paul has proven. I think Ricky's proven.
Ricky has it, yeah.
They have that. We've seen other players in the past as well. And I'm sure there's other players on tour that do. They just might not have the talent to consistently be up there. But, I think, to be honest with you, I feel like if Kevin Jones was a little bit more consistent, I feel like he's the type of player that has that instinct too, to where the thing with Eagle, I don't know if it's not that he doesn't have that killer instinct to win, whereas the thing that confuses me about it is where he doesn't check the scores coming down the stretch.
Right.
So it's hard to know when to kick it in.
Yeah.
If he has the scoreboard behind him, he can kind of feel his card, but sometimes you need to look at it and know. And
there is something to be said in the game of golf of it's you versus the course, but that can be a first 3 rounds. That can be a first 3 rounds plus 9 holes mindset, and speaking in a 4-round setting. But when you're coming down the stretch, the game it's no longer you versus the course. It's you having to play chess with the guys that are right around you on the leaderboard, because they are going to be decisions that you need to make that are no longer just pertaining to you doing what you can control, but also,
trying to
working around
them.
the leaderboard. Yeah, forcing their hand because they're paying attention to the scoreboard. So they're going to be watching you to see if you lay that up or if you run that putt, and that's going to change what they do. So there comes a time where, it's admirable to not pay attention to the scores when you don't need to be during those, early rounds. But eventually, you've got to be aware of that.
I almost think it's a different type of instinct, killer instinct for Eagle, where he might not have the killer instinct of I'm going to put you away, but his instinct is I'm just going to play the course as aggressive and is I'm going to stick to my game plan no matter what. And if that gets me the win, that gets me the win. If that doesn't, that doesn't. To where it's not necessarily a coming down the stretch, I know what I need to do. I think if we were in a major, if he's on USDGC going into hole 17 this upcoming weekend, he'll know where he's at. I think
hope so.
I think that
he's got quite a hike up that hill to figure it out.
I think there's a difference, between, hey, I'm just going to this pro tour, I feel really great. I'm gonna just focus on my game and just see where it takes me. And even when he said oh, I won, what he thought in his head, he had putted for the tie. So he had a general idea of where he was at, but not to the point of looking at UDisc and being oh, okay, so I need to make this for the win, or I need whatever it is. But on the other side of the coin, we had a very close battle with the MPO. FPO, this has got to be one of the most dominant performances we've seen.
It was a runaway.
And one thing that I loved about this tournament, and I don't remember when the first time I said it on this podcast was, but one of the things I loved about this tournament is if you look at the top of the FPO leaderboard and compare it to the top of the MPO leaderboard, scores are looking very similar. So why is that important? Because every time I talk about this, the same comments come up of, well, that doesn't matter. Par is relative, right? Paige shooting 33 down and Calvin shooting 31 down. The score under par doesn't matter because it's a stroke game. You're playing the course. I get that. As a player, that makes sense. Go out, shoot the best you can, whatever. As a fan, that's not the same thing. That's not the case. Par does matter as a fan, because as a fan, if you didn't watch the FPO and I did, okay, and I'm dude, I walk up to you the next day, I'm Paige shredded the final round. You're oh, what'd she shoot? I'm she shot 2 down.
Yeah.
Then that just is okay.
A bit deflating, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas in this case, I would come up to you, Paige shredded the final round. You're what'd she shoot? 14 down. It doesn't matter that they might both be 1044 rated. Okay?
It's true.
But it being 14 down puts this little more just oh, frick, that's a hot round on our minds. So I think this was a perfect example of the FPO field, the course being designed and set up for their game to where they can shoot, use their skills, the more technical side. A lot of them don't have the same type of pushing distance and stuff like that the MPO side has. Use this, making the pars and stuff fit the FPO skill set so that we can see scores like this. That is great for the FPO field, in my opinion.
I think so. It makes a better headline. It's a lot more exciting.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's going to help get more people in, is because now, if I'm just a fan and I heard Paige shot 14 down the final round, and maybe that's just me, but I'm a lot more likely to go back and watch that round than I am if you told me Paige shot 2 down or 1 up or 3 down or whatever it may be.
And it's so true. Like, I've seen I've been getting a lot of people into disc golf and like seeing a lot of beginners play the game, and my mindset is very much par is relative. Like, don't worry about those numbers. But when I'm playing with them, I'll be out there playing with, my fiance, where we're trying to like explain the game and show her how to play. And, she'll, if she makes like a really good 5 on a hole, all they're thinking is bogey, the beginners. Bogey, birdie, and par like resonate way more than the number.
Yeah.
So like making those birdies more reasonable to achieve, it really does have a more positive effect on the game, I think. Yeah. Even for the players, I think.
Yeah.
Because as a player, like
it would be like deflating if I went out and I tore up the course. I'm like 2 over, and there's courses like that for MPO too.
Right.
Like if you go play, I think Northwoods is a good example. A lot of the MPO field is going to be around par or over par. A very, very hot rounds like 9 under. That course can beat you up. And I'm all for courses getting tougher and getting away from shooting like 15, 16 down.
Yeah.
But at the same time, on the FPO side, I'm for courses getting not necessarily easier.
Just similar to what.
Yeah, I want the MPO and FPO scores to match
kind
up.
of align. Yeah.
Because I think that is something that kind of plays into this whole thing of like people not wanting to watch the FPO, because the number one reason you hear is it's boring.
Right, and
it's way more electric when people are hitting putts for eagle, even if it's a 400-foot hole and that putt was for eagle. That just sounds way better than that was for birdie. I
can say, just watching, the FPO coverage of the US or it's their national championship.
Yeah, women's nationals.
That they're playing a slightly easier layout there at Winthrop, and I really enjoyed watching it more than I have recently, because all the holes were very much attackable for them, and a lot of times it's just as simple as shortening up the tee pad, and it makes all the difference in the world. And it makes it a lot more exciting, I think, for them and for the spectators.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people will come at the opposite side and be like, well, shortening it up, then that just makes it look more boring. And I don't think so.
You could barely tell the difference.
Exactly.
Right? You can barely tell the difference. A lot of the holes, and maybe it probably works better at some courses than others.
Definitely.
Especially, it probably works a lot better at open courses where you're not taking away initial gaps and things like that. But at Winthrop, especially, like, it's very tough to notice. You're just kind of like, I think that gap's a little closer, but it's not.
If you hadn't watched the tournament years and years and years, you wouldn't notice.
No.
Yeah, and that
it still looks like a real
tough
course.
And it allows them to score under par. I think going into tomorrow, the FPO is pretty much done. The majority of the lead card, I won't say who's on it in case people are worried about spoilers somehow with this. The majority of the lead card's under par.
I think the whole lead card is.
I feel under. One person might have been even.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at it percentage wise, I feel like Jonesboro and possibly even USDGC, the percentage of the field under par to over par is going to be very similar to the MPO field, which I think is great for women's disc golf, because I think that is just going to make more people more interested when you have people shooting 14 down in their final round and 33 down for the tournament, and that's good.
Yeah.
And on top of it, having a player absolutely dominate like Paige is exciting to watch regardless.
Yeah.
Which we can talk about if that makes disc golf boring, having a player dominate, but
no, Paige is fun to watch.
She's a ton of fun to watch.
She's super good.
Yeah, and it's sickening how good she is. So I'm trying to think what she averaged this weekend. I know her final round was like 1040 something rated. I think she shot all 3 of her rounds were over 1,000 rated.
What'd she finish at, like 33 down?
33, yeah. It was an insane performance, and something that obviously had to be talked about there. So now we're going to move on to, I hope you're ready for this. It's time for Trevor's Trivia.
I'm ready.
So this is going to be USDGC themed to kind of prep, well, at least I think it is.
Yes.
Okay, it's going to be USDGC themed to kind of prep us for the talks about the USDGC, which, like I said, started today or yesterday by the time you're listening to this today for us. So let's hear what you got. How many questions you got this week?
Got 3 questions for you. Shout out to the Discord for giving me some of these ideas.
If you want to join our Discord, links in the description below.
Right. Yes, I will.
Lots of. If you like disc golf and talking with other disc golfers, is one of the better places to be.
It's very fun. The live tournament chat, we've been in there today. It's a lot of fun to kind of feel like you're watching with everybody, especially during COVID. All right, first question. This one's a little bit tough, but you know some things that surprise me sometimes. So, as you know, the USDGC, they have these rocks, these commemorative rocks. There was like a trend for a while where like everybody's stable rock in their bag to play for them had one of these rocks. I got the 0506 rock.
Yeah.
So, they actually called this rock their, and I quoted this, primary source of funding for the tournament. That's
interesting.
Yeah. They keep track of these things. They have like these like lists for like every single one they make, so that and people can like claim, like have their names on it. So the question is, what was the first year they made these?
The first year they made commemorative rocks.
Yeah.
Well, the tournament started in 97, I think.
No.
99?
Yes.
99. 97 is my birth year, so I should have known that because like 20 years old. So I'm gonna say 2003.
2001.
Dang it!
I wasn't sure. So I knew the only reason you would know that is if you had a knowledge of these rocks to know that there's an 01 rock.
Only reason I knew it wasn't 99 is because you wouldn't have asked me the question if they always had it. And so I was like, all right, I'll go a few years after.
Yeah, I didn't know if you had knowledge of those rocks or not.
I'm not sure. I was never a big rock collector. I was never super into it.
I never had one. I always wanted one. And I know like when I first got into it, you could get like 2012, 2013. Those were like a couple years before my time. And they were like $70, $80 on certain sites. And I was like, oh, so tempted. But then Rock 3s came out and solved everybody's problem.
Yeah, I was never a big rock collector.
Yeah. So, all right, question number 2. So, this is an interesting one. In the past 5 years, who has the most top 10 finishes in the MPO division?
In the last 5?
In the last 5 years, who's the most top 10 finishes? I got this question from Discord, and it was fact-checked very well.
I don't think it's Paul. Because the last 5 years, he won in 2015, won in 2018, 2019, he was outside the top 5. Or top 10? Top 5.
This is top 10 finishes.
Top 10. He was outside the top 10 in 2019. And 2016, I feel like he didn't have a great showing either. But last 5 goes back to 2014. Or are you saying 2015 to now?
15, 16, 17, 18, 19.
Okay. Which year am I missing? 15, 16, 17. Oh, 17. I don't know what he did in 17. So I don't think it's Paul. I'm thinking players that are always near the top. Dang, I don't actually really know. Sexton, I feel like, has a lot of top 10 finishes at the USDGC. I feel like he's always in like 6th or 7th. He's always up there. But is that the most? I mean, if he was 5 for 5, it'd be the most. I'm going to go Sexton. I'm going to go Nate Sexton.
Incorrect. It's actually Ricky with 4 of them.
Ricky.
4 out of 5. There was a couple guys that had 3. Ricky was like, it was like 2 seconds,
one of those
a third,
3?
a fifth. I think Sexton did have 3.
That makes me feel better at least. Ricky was, I was thinking through, when you think of USDGC, you normally see like Sexton up top. You normally see Ricky up top. Paul is normal. If Paul's up top, I feel like he's kind of like winning or he's not up top. I don't. Right. That could be incorrect. That's just how my mind works.
Here, I have it here. So Ricky has a 5th, 2nd, 3rd, and 2nd. Actually, Sexton might not have been on there. So, oh yeah, Sexton had a 4th, a 1st, and 4th. Coling had a 2nd, 1st, and a 10th.
Yeah, Coling was another one.
Dickerson had a 5th, a 10th, and a 10th.
Dickerson's surprising.
Eagle had 3. Macbeth had 3. Doss had 3. Yuli had 3. Quite a few guys.
Doss had 3 in the last 5 years.
8th, and 3rd.
That's even more impressive because he didn't play last year. He might not have played the year before. He might have went 3 for 3 before he missed 2.
Yeah, Ricky with the.
All right, what's the final one?
Final question.
I probably should have guessed Rick.
This one I just learned about. I didn't even know this. Well, I think I'd heard of this once before, but this is pretty crazy. So during the 2003 USDGC, Ken Climo and Barry Schultz battled in the legendary sudden death playoff. How many holes was the playoff? Who won? And which hole did it end on? I will tell you that they do the 3-hole loop. That is still...
Yeah, the 1, 17, 18.
Yes.
Barry Schultz won, I believe.
That is correct.
I'm going to say it ended on... Dang. I'm going to say, I feel like I've heard of it. Would have started on 1. For some reason, 9 holes in my head. And so if it started on 1, I better get at least this math right if I say 9 holes.
Yeah.
Well, do they replay 18 to start?
Trying
to think back to the 2014 playoff. I feel like they walked back to 18's tee.
I think they did.
So if they started on 18...
Yeah.
So then 4. I'm just counting all the way through. 8. I don't know why this is so hard in my head. So I'm going to say 17.
The answer was 10 holes. They ended on 18.
Okay, at least I have my math right.
Yeah. I was waiting to see if that was going to add up.
That's why I counted on my head. I was like,
yeah.
I am not going publicly on air.
I didn't, I'd never really heard of that. And I was just thinking when I read, I was like, could you imagine if we got something like that today?
I remember it because I didn't remember how many holes, but I only heard of it because I believe it was one of the Ricky and Paul battles coming down the stretch, and they were just going back and forth at USDGC. I believe it was Ricky and Paul, and we were coming into like 16 or 17. I was standing next to Justin Alderman from Innova. Mm-hmm. And it was already starting to get like kind of dark because the round was taking forever. And I was like, what do we do about a playoff? Like, if this thing goes into a playoff, what do we do? And he was like, if it's a few holes, we should be okay daylight time. He's like, but if it goes on like that Barry Ken playoff, he's like, we'll have to stop it and go tomorrow or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I remembered hearing about it then, but I couldn't remember the exact amount of holes.
Well, you know, it's interesting in the U.S. Open in ball golf, there's no sudden death playoff for the U.S. Open. They do the next day. They play 18 holes, just the 2 guys. Could you imagine if disc golf had something like that? That would be epic.
Would it though? Because then like
it ends up being quite interesting. Because when
it could be, but it also could be like, 8 holes in, someone's up by 6.
It could be.
And then you have to play 10
It's a very odd rule, and it's very like frustrating when you're watching that tournament. You're like, oh my gosh, I gotta wait another day to see who wins. I always like sudden death.
I like sudden death way more.
Yeah.
I feel like there's so much pressure.
It's crazy. The fact that they went 10 holes and played 17 over and over and over and over again, and just
so they played 17 3 times.
And I think Barry Schultz chained out for an ace on 17 at one point.
Oh my gosh, is there footage of this? There's gotta be.
I don't think so.
There's gotta be.
Maybe.
Disc Golf Planet or someone was filming.
But this article, they were putting down videos for everything that had videos for it, and they didn't put anything down for it.
Someone has it on a VCR or something.
Probably.
If you're at home listening or watching and you happen to have footage of that, find a way.
It's got to be so sick.
To at least get it online to send it to me.
Yeah.
I want to watch it.
It's got to be sick.
All right. Let's move on then to talk about USDGC in general. So I want to first just kind of talk about the tournament itself. Every year USDGC comes up, there's similar controversies, or not even really controversies. There's similar like points that people bring up, talk about, and then they're still around the next year. Mm-hmm. And they keep coming up. So I'm going to reference back to the Ultiworld article that I referenced a few weeks back. It was an interview between Charlie Eisenhood and the president of the board of the PDGA. So a very high up person at the PDGA.
Right.
And so talking about USDGC directly, it was basically the general question was, should a manufacturer be able to own a PDGA major? Is kind of the topic I want to talk on. But he talked to them and said, do you think the PDGA has a responsibility to have more say in the way that a major like USDGC is disseminated? So this is the board of directors president response. Well, USDGC is not our thing, right? It's a major, and it's an awesome event, one of the biggest and best events out there, but it's run by the folks in Rock Hill. And it just so happens that this year is just unique, and they're running a concurrent women's event. It's not usually the case. In fact, you notice the name is different. It's because it's not actually U.S. Women's, and there's good and bad about that. I think running concurrent with the men's tournament, I think that some of it's good. I love to watch FPO, and I watch FPO lead card, second card, just like the men for me. That part isn't what I wanted to bring up. I want to talk about his initial response. Well, the USDGC is not our thing. This is the PDGA, a PDGA major.
All right.
Going into the second part of these questions, the Ultra would ask again, this is a long-standing decision at this point, but do you think that a manufacturer like Innova should be able to have control over one of the sport's 3 professional majors in the USDGC? And this is the board of director president response. Yeah, I just don't have much of an issue with it, I guess. Innova's pouring a lot of money into this event. In fact, they've done it for 20 years, right? Yeah, about 20, I think. And so, hey, just keep pouring money into it. And then, all of our majors have big sponsors. Glassblown Open's not a major, but it's a big event. Glassblown's kind of dynamic disc thing, and it's awesome too. And it's awesome in a kind of different way. Each manufacturer has its own events, and, they're pouring money into resources into these events. I think it's great. So, two things.
Did he just say? Did he just say all majors have corporate or manufacturer sponsors? What did
big
he say?
Sponsors. All of our majors have a big sponsor.
Right. Okay, but then he proceeds to name non-majors.
He named it NT and Glassblown. But that's because if you look at the tournament, Glassblown is probably the closest thing to USDGC in that a manufacturer owns it. It's almost like D-Glow or Ledgestone.
Right.
Like Ledgestone's never going to happen outside of Discraft, basically. But the difference with all those is they're not a major.
Yeah, well, that's the
and
big thing.
Another thing too is a title sponsor has no say in how the tournaments ran.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
Whereas this is the opposite way around.
Yeah.
Innova's the title sponsor of a PDGA major, but the PDGA has no say in how it's ran almost.
Right. Having like corporate entities pour money into events, yeah, of course that's a great thing. That's the goal of the sport. We want that to happen. But yeah, you want them doing that because they want to get exposure, not because they want to run the event.
Well, another thing too is let's say that this was an open market where the USDGC is the PDGA major and it's on the market every year
for bidding.
Yeah, it's still at Winthrop.
Mm-hmm.
It's still, it's still down there. The course is the same, blah, blah, blah. How much more added cash is coming in? If you have now you can fight between Discraft, Innova, Dynamic, Prodigy. You're all fighting now.
Or none of the above.
Now you're getting
LL Bean or whoever, Bushnell.
Yeah, Yupong hats.
Right.
I looked at your hat. Now you're getting North Face in. You're getting someone. Like, this is a prestigious title.
Right.
So, how much money are we losing?
Yeah.
By keeping it there.
That's a good point because they can set that bar wherever they want.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing with this whole deal is the bummer is that USDGC is, like, in my opinion, we talked before about like majors needing to have like history behind them and having that sense of prestige, down the road. And USDGC is the only event that really does a great job of that, I think. Or they do the best job. Not the only one that does a great job. They do the best job of it. Like the USDGC to me, because Worlds, the title itself is the most prestigious, but that's only because it's world champion, right? And that's because disc golf that's what they put on discs. So-and-so world titles. Disc golf loves the whole idea of the world champion. But the USDGC as an event is like, it's run so professionally. Everybody treats it so special.
It's like probably the hardest tournament to win as well.
It's so hard to win. The winner's changing all the time.
Yeah.
And it's on like the best tournament golf course there is, really, like as far as challenging the players and just psyching them out and making them crumble. Like, it's so exciting to watch. But Innova has that hostage because they did start it.
Yeah.
In fairness, it's not like it started and Innova bought it. No, Innova literally created this thing.
And that's another thing too, is like if you look back in 1999 when it started, it's always been an Innova event, and it's always been a major.
Right.
It just started as a major.
And the thing is, the game was small enough back then that, like, Innova had every right to say, like, it's not like they were some kind of monopoly back then, like, saying, we're going to own the major. They were like, hey, we should have a United States Disc Golf Championship. We have the resources to get that going, so let's do it. And they just so happened to still run it, which if I were them, like from Innova's point of view, of course,
I wouldn't give it up.
Of course they still own it, because that's the thing now. You're only, if the PDGA wanted to have all the majors, which, I mean, in their position, obviously they're like, yeah, we don't really care because it doesn't really do much harm to anything. But if they wanted to have it, they would just have to create their own separate thing. And then they'd have to compete with a tournament that the players love.
Well, see, this is the tough thing to me is, well, I mean, there's another side of this too, is like, it's a PDGA major that doesn't even play by PDGA rules.
Right. Well, so, it's broken.
Yeah. Now, in
that sense,
I do want to say I like the USDGC's variant of the rules more than the PDGA.
So do I.
But if it's a PDGA major, it should play by the current PDGA rules.
Right.
There shouldn't be
It's
this.
quite odd.
There shouldn't be this thing of yeah, I averaged 1080 at USDGC, but my rating's going to go down because it doesn't count. Like, it just doesn't count towards it. That doesn't make sense to me. But as far as someone owning a PDGA major, it makes no sense at all to me.
Yeah.
Because then the PDGA forfeits all their control. And if, like that's literally the exact quote, well, USDGC is not our thing, right? Incorrect. It's a PDGA major. It is your thing. It is the PDGA's thing.
You just don't own it.
You just don't own it. You have no control over it.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, it's a bummer, but like that whole thing is gridlocked because unless somehow, like, Innova's never giving that up, because why would they? They're going to have to be bought out, basically. That they're going to have to, somebody is going to have to, and I don't even know, I'm sure there's no contract structure because they created the event. It's not like they bought it. So like somebody is going to have to bring an offer to the table, whether that be the PDGA.
It would have to be the PDGA. Because no one else should be able to buy it.
And they're going to have to say, we're going to pay this much for the rights to this event. That's the only way they're getting out of that situation, because Innova's not going to hand it over, obviously.
Well, I think you would,
and the event
if the PDGA cared enough to get it, which in my opinion would be a good investment for them, not to buy it, but a good investment for them to look into, how do we do this?
Yeah.
They would need to just create a competing major and take out USDGC as a major. That's what you would have to do.
I know, but
that's the way.
That's just a bummer.
Unless Innova's like, or I'm even fine with Innova being the title sponsor and the PDGA being like, hey, we'll agree to keep you on as a title sponsor, the main host of the event, for X amount of years.
Yeah.
Where you're the title sponsor, you're the presenting sponsor, but we need to own the event. We need to take it on to where we're doing it.
I just don't see Innova giving it up. And like the competing major thing, it's such a bummer that like this is like the only event, like every other event in disc golf, that if it was owned by a company and PDGA said we're just going to create our own one, I'd be fine with. But because of Winthrop being like the iconic US course, like I would be so bummed out.
Well, like the tough part is if I'm Dynamic and I own the Glass Blown Open, right? And I'm sitting there, I'm upset because there's no, like, I'm not a major. So like there's no way that Dynamic can own a major. There's no way Discraft can own a major now. You know what I mean? There's no way they can put their name on the World Championship and sponsor it and stuff.
There's no room for anymore.
But they can't own it, right? So there's always going to be this thing of like, no one else will ever be able to do USDGC merch. No one else will be able to do. You can put like, you could put Eric Oakley, one-time USDGC champion, on a Dynamic disc, or Paul Macbeth, 3-time USDGC champion, on a Force or something. But you couldn't ever create merch. You couldn't ever capitalize on the event. And so there's also, you can't vend there because Innova controls who's vending there.
Yeah.
All of that stuff should go away. It should be a PDGA owned event. If the main pro shop wants to be only Innova and Innova's the title sponsor, cool. But the fly marts and stuff, every company should be able to be there, represented at the USDGC. There's normally so many fans there.
Yeah.
To me, it's almost a bad, not really a bad look, but a bad thing for the sport to have a manufacturer own one of the majors and fully control one of the majors to where they can do their own thing. They can charge $20, $30, $40 for pay-per-view as a PDGA major.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I completely agree in the fact that the situation's unfortunate, but I also am not going to fault Innova whatsoever, because
I'm not faulting Innova.
Yeah, because
this is smart, not Innova.
It's smart business, and in fairness, they do a good job with the event.
They do a great job. They run it
well. I thought they did.
The event
itself,
they run perfectly.
Yeah,
perfectly. I don't know why I said it that way.
Perfectly.
The design of the course, I think, has some question marks to it.
It's all right. Well, I was more pointing towards the coverage.
I was going to say, the coverage and some of the other stuff we'll get to in a second has some question marks to it.
Yeah.
But there's not really an event that treats players as professionals as much as the USDGC does.
Right.
So I'm not coming at Innova. I don't want that to come across as I am. I'm coming at the PDGA for not even coming at them. I'm saying the PDGA needs to own this major. And if they're not going to own it, they need to at least say, if you want to be a PDGA major, you have to enforce our current rules. I understand like X majors and stuff like that. Like the collegiate disc golf is a PDGA AM only major, but pros are allowed to play in it because of the rules of collegiate disc golf. That's a little bit different, because the rules of the game didn't change.
Mm-hmm.
The USDGC, the rules of the game change. and mainly in stroke and distance. I think that's pretty much the only one. And their reasoning behind it makes sense, because imagine hole 17 without stroke and distance. It's just like a normal island hole where you proceed to a drop zone after one.
Yeah, honestly, if I'm the PDGA, if I'm the PDGA, I would just add clauses to the rules that allows you to select a way an island hole can be played and things like that, like of that nature, to make it so that the USDGC can be PDGA compliant, and then just be like, and then mention it to them. Just be like, this isn't really, we're gonna work with you. We're gonna make this work, but then we want you to use our rules. And
I mean, that's pretty much it. Yeah. That's pretty much the only one.
Because that's not hard to do. They can do whatever they want with the rules.
I mean, there's weird things, like I just read today, hole 17, if you're on the island and you're safe on the island and your putt goes OB, you still don't play line of flight. You re-putt.
That one doesn't make sense.
That's crazy. It's on the T sign, if you don't believe me.
Yeah, that's dumb.
That's crazy. But stuff like that, it's against the PDGA rule. So how is a PDGA major playing against their rules? Yeah. And it is tough because it's the most prestigious title to a lot of extent. It's the title with the most history, again, to a lot of extent. Because I mean, the world champion, I think the difference is it rotates.
Right.
So like Worlds doesn't have this history behind the course. You can't.
Like world champion has history, but like the world championships doesn't necessarily have the same, because
like when you think of USDGC, you think of people crumbling on hole 17. You think of the pressure on that. You think of, the hole 1, even though we lost it last year, it's back. You think of all these things.
And I don't mind events moving. Don't get me wrong. Something that ball golf does that's like kind of cool is they will do kind of a rotation, and a rotation that might take 20 years to even get back to a course that's been there before, but they'll like visit courses they've been at before. Like there are certain courses you associate with certain majors. And that's kind of cool. Like I'd like to, see a world championships like 20 years down the line, be like, oh, I remember when they were there in, 2015. And like, yeah, that's a good world's course. Like, I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Because then you can kind of look back and see like what happened at certain holes. Like, oh, I remember when they played this last time.
Yeah. One thing good about worlds rotating is, and hopefully this is coming soon. It's good for tourism.
Yeah.
And it also allows it to go overseas, which hopefully will happen soon.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a world championship. I don't understand why. I get that the majority of the field's going to be from the U.S., but if you put it in Finland, the top pros from the U.S. that have a chance at winning are going over there, and then you're still going to have a full tournament from a great crop of Finnish pros. Oh,
sure, yeah.
Or even just European pros in general.
Yeah.
So to me, if it's rotating, I think it goes like East Coast, Midwest, West Coast, Finland, maybe somewhere else in Europe, back to East Coast. Yeah. And then you just keep, have it on some type of cycle.
I'm very excited to have the European Open back.
Yes, absolutely.
The European majors are so good.
European Open is similar to USDGC in how good it treats.
And they stay at the same course, right? It's always at the Beast.
Pretty sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
USDGC and European Open are really good majors.
Now, I do want to talk about the course a little bit. I feel like every year we hear more and more backlash against the USDGC for course design. Mm-hmm. Obviously, last year there was an anomaly in what was holes 3 and 4, but I'm not going to worry about those because those are gone. They went back to 1 and 2.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on the amount of ropes and ways that they make the course hard? Right. Do they overdo it?
I will say this. I'll applaud the USDGC for initially designing a course that, for the most part, has held up to today's competition. From literally, I'm reading this article today, and Barry Schultz is talking about how on 18 he threw his DX Beast. Like, the game has changed a lot. A lot of it is because of the equipment, and for the most part, it's kept its structure. And I think a lot of that has to do with, because the event is so prestigious, guys just play nervous out there. Like the old hole 1, I loved the old hole 1. I'm talking about the straight little putter shot, because guys would miss that hole all the time because you got jitters.
Yeah.
And like that's, you're a good event when you can be difficult just because of how much people want to win.
Just because it's USDGC.
Just because it's the name, right?
Even when we were playing Dean's Cup, which had nothing to do with the USDGC.
It's nerve-wracking.
But you were on the course and you heard your name called by the same guy. Yeah, your nerves skyrocketed.
Yeah, it's
even just stepping up to 17's tee in a practice round, you look at it and you're like, whew.
Yeah.
Because there's just history behind it. That's the biggest thing, is the history behind that course. But
as far as like adjusting it though, like the ropes, I've never had a problem. I love like having all the roped OB, and They've made some changes. Like you can pretty much. I don't think they've tightened the ropes to a point where it's like, okay, come on. Like they're still fair enough, the ropes, and I like the way they're placed. The OB makes sense there typically. The biggest complaint people get is the mozzarella sticks, the wooden poles that are next to certain baskets. I think they're on 2, 16, and there's one in the middle.
8, I believe.
Is it 8?
Yes.
So basically what they're doing with those holes is they're trying to add some kind of defense to the hole by forcing you to throw your upshot to a certain place. It seems like that's the goal of the mozzarella stick, is like, we want you to throw your drive or your upshot on a harder line.
Yeah.
Because you throw it the easier line, you're now dealing with these random wooden poles. A good example of that would be on hole 2. If you take it over the parking lot and land on the left side of the basket, right, you're not dealing with them.
Yeah.
If you play towards the fence, a little bit safer,
which is the more common play.
you're going to have to deal with mozzarella sticks. So like that's an example of that. And here is, if that's the goal, if that's what they're trying to accomplish with those, they look so bad and they're so annoying. There's a more elegant way to do that, and I think it is hazard bunkers or areas, right? So if you land in it, you're getting a penalty stroke, but you're not putting through some wooden pole. You're just putting from where you landed in the hazard, and it still makes it so that you have to do the same thing. You have to throw your upshot a different line because you're avoiding something. So I think there's just a more elegant way to do that, and like, some sand bunkers would look like really, really nice in that course. It would fit the aesthetic. There's sand on hole 6.
Mm-hmm.
Looks great. Like they could do that. I guess that might be confusing that sand's not OB, but the other ones are. But that's the only problem I've ever had, I think, with what they've done to that course to make it more difficult. I think it's pretty much a consensus. I mean, even Eagle McMahon himself, a top pro, despises them. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say they're a good addition.
Yeah, I mean, Dustin Keegan, I think, Innova posted a picture, or it might have been USDGC, posted a picture of like hole 16 and said, how are you approaching it this year? And he said, with a chainsaw to cut those things down and then go back to play a real hole.
Yeah, and Eagle reposted it.
Yeah, Eagle reposted it and said, like, that's amazing. But I honestly think that I might, and it sounds like you're in the same boat as me, we might be in the minority in this part of it where the ropes, as a spectator, and even when I've played the course, I've never been as a competitor, but playing the course just like warming up, they don't bother me.
No.
Because to me, I think the hard part is like the visual of it. People don't like looking like hole 3, for instance. There's no rhyme or reason to shaping the fairway the way they did.
Right.
It's the ropes just on the left, to where it might be hard visually watching to tell if someone's in bounds or out of bounds. Okay. But I think that what you said is a good thing, is like they've succeeded in keeping the history of the course together, and the ropes allow them to change the course enough to make it tighter in some spots, lengthen the whole landing zone, like where you want to be landing and stuff like that, to where it can adapt, and it can consistently challenge the top of the game over and over and over.
And we've played it. We've played these ropes. I've seen them in person. I've thrown them, and they are completely fair.
Yeah, and you can, once you've played it in one practice round, when you release your shot, it's never, it might be confusing if it rolled or not, if it's inbounds, but when you release a shot, you know where you're getting to, and it's very challenging, and they've done a great job of that. And another thing that plays into this is the fact that they use 2 different types of OB, but they do have hazard and they do have OB.
Yeah,
that is something that we've pushed for on this podcast before. And I think this tournament reiterates it. I think it's great, and I think that should be a common thing in disc golf, that there's hazard areas and that there's OB areas, and that they're 2 different things. Mm-hmm. Because, for instance, on hole 3, if you're very short, you're OB. So you're basically retee, I believe, is your only option at that point with a stroke. Whereas if you're up by the basket left, you have a putt and a stroke penalty.
Yeah.
Now, I don't advise, a regular like amateur tournament just throwing hazard into the middle of a field. But when you have something like sand trap, if you're playing a golf course, Las Vegas Challenge has done that. Or you have something that's kind of a natural hazard, something, I don't know what it would be in the woods, but, something that you can rope off and be like, hey, if you land here, you're still playing from there because you didn't throw a great shot, but you're also penalized 1 stroke. Mm-hmm. I think that type of stuff can add to where we can make courses slightly more difficult, slightly more challenging, make players have to think on their upshot, because that's something in disc golf. If you throw a good drive, a lot of times your upshot, you're rewarded with just, all right, just get up and down. It's pretty easy. The drives are a lot of times the difficult part, whereas upshots don't have something naturally challenging a lot of times.
Yeah, I like the idea of like defense around the hole, because like in ball golf, they can obviously move the pin around to make it so like your position A isn't always just like, and there's starting to be some courses I've seen where like your position A isn't just like, okay, I'm just going to throw it and get as close to the pin. It's like, I'm going to throw it and aim for the left side of the green because like I don't want to mess around with the pin that's hugging this. Like,
yeah,
I think that's too a thing, like pin placement like near OB is like really important to making those upshots difficult, because like 17 is a good example of this. Like, obviously your strategy on 17 is not to attack the pin.
Yeah.
Especially when it's in that left pin. You're aiming to dump about 25, 30 feet right of it.
Yeah, and then
I want to see more. I want to see like, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have the pin accessible, because there's courses like that where you throw the perfect shot and then you're still 30 feet away. No, the pin should be accessible, but your play should be to land a bit further out, because that is what will make putting more important in the game and maybe drop scores a little bit.
Yeah. So I think as far as the ropes go and what they're doing with hazard and OB, I'm a fan of. Yes, there's a lot of it out there, a whole lot, and I could see where your first time watching it's confusing. But as far as the mozzarella sticks, these wooden poles, I don't like them.
They're an eyesore.
I don't like them. I think it just kind of makes the USDGC look gimmicky to a certain degree.
Yeah, they're pretty dumb. And
I just don't like anything that close to the basket.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. They're so close to the basket.
They're like within 10 feet.
Yeah.
And so you have like on the FPO coverage on hole 2.
There should be nothing within, unless you're like thick in the woods, like there really shouldn't be anything inside of 30 feet.
Yeah.
Like if you're in the circle, you should be rewarded with a putt.
And that's the thing too, is it's designed for making the upshot harder, right?
Yeah.
But it also has repercussions outside of that, to where Haley King on hole 2 today, this morning, she had like I want to say like a 50-some footer that she threw. It looked perfect for her birdie.
Yeah.
And then it hit a mozzarella, it just clipped a mozzarella stick and kicked to the right.
Yeah.
And then, so that's not what that's there for, but because it's a physical thing standing up and down, it's punishing people farther back the fairway as well.
Right.
Whereas that wasn't necessarily the goal of putting them in. And the second thing it did is it takes, still on hole 2, I believe it was, Paige had like a 25-footer and had to basically do a full split to be able to see the basket. And I think she still missed left because she couldn't quite see the full basket.
Yeah.
That just I don't like that. I think that just makes the sport look silly to a certain degree, whereas it could have had the same effect if Paige was putting from a hazard area, or if it's a casual, like if you throw right, it's a mandatory casual relief area where if you might be 15 feet and now you have to take relief to 27 feet.
Yeah.
Because you're in this mandatory relief area or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's other ways around it that visually that provide the same effect score-wise,
Sure,
but don't visually make our sport look gimmicky.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing to me.
Yeah, we just gotta avoid that in disc golf is looking gimmicky.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the live coverage a little bit and then get into some predictions. The FPO side, I don't think we really can do predictions because we watched the whole first round. The MPO side, though, I think we can do predictions on, because we haven't really seen too many scores. Everyone that's a powerhouse name is only, when we saw was only a few holes in.
Yeah.
So we can talk about what we think is going to happen, but live coverage. I went on the record a few weeks ago and I said, look, I have no problem with the payment, the $20, $30, $40 structure, as long as the quality is there and is better than the Disc Golf Network provided because of the price point. And unfortunately,
it's awful.
It did not start good. It did not start good at all. And it wasn't like, what's tough is I don't think it was the people behind the scenes. It was the switcher. The switcher was struggling this morning. I don't want to fully rate the stream because we do still have several days, but it gave me a little bit of flashbacks to the Pro Tour when they tried to bring it all in-house for the Memorial, and they were working out the kinks live on air. And it's like, no. Like, especially in this case, I paid $20 to watch this. I'm not paying to watch you make mistakes and figure out this thing.
You get paid for a polished product.
Yeah, I paid for you to already have this worked out.
Right.
So this morning, for instance, FPO hole 1, where they had the intro, it looked good. They cut to Hannah Macbeth and Juliana Korver. They talked. They were very, nothing. Everything was going good. Mm-hmm. They were doing good. They had some good topics, time filler wise. Cuts over to hole 1, introduces the players. That's when things kind of were like, what's going on? So the cuts were not very smooth.
No.
The transitions weren't very smooth. The shots of the players, it started on hole 1, but then several times throughout the FPO round, out of focus, to where I'm like shooting Trevor clearly, but then like some random guy on his phone in the background was in focus. And so I'm like, you're drawing my eye to that random guy by accident.
Yeah.
Also, players would throw.
This was the worst crime of the whole thing.
And it would stay on the player.
You would not only like, sometimes it would happen right as they're releasing the disc and then switch, but like, I want to see
the flight.
I want to see it come out of their hand. Like, I don't want to see like their reaction.
Well, there was times where you didn't even.
Sometimes you didn't see it at all. Yes, the commentators, the poor commentators, like you got Hannah and Juliana Korver, are like having to speculate what may have happened.
They had no idea
by looking at the player's reaction, and like honestly, they did best they could. Like, I felt so bad for them. I would have been really upset because I'm like,
yeah.
And they're having to look at UDisc to see where that shot landed.
Yeah, that happened multiple times where Juliana Korver was like, well, judging on her body language, that looked like it might not have been a great shot. And then Hannah was like, yeah, well, looking at my UDisc, it appears it's off the fairway.
And like, good on you for at least looking at UDisc. Like, that was smart because like...
Props to you to being able to recover that a little bit.
Yeah.
But that was frustrating for us as a viewer because...
That's bad, yeah.
Not even the commentators knew where this disc went.
I'm telling you right now, it's day 1, but like if I'm watching round 4 and somebody throws an important shot or a putt and I don't see it, I'm going to be real mad.
As the round went on, it seemed to get better. At the beginning of the round, they also cut to a drone shot, and then they tried to throw up a scoreboard graphic that flashed on the screen and went away, and then flashed on again, and then they cut away from it.
Yeah, some of the graphics were a bit choppy.
So that was weird. They also had the hot mic on the camera constantly on, and to the point that at the beginning, the first few holes, you couldn't hear Hannah or Juliana Korver at all. Mm-hmm. Like they would... Yeah. Your guess is as good as mine is what they said. And my audio on my Mac was all the way up, and all I could hear was birds chirping, and, you could hear the players throwing great, and the wind, you could hear that real good, but you couldn't hear the commentators. Mm-hmm. They seemed to fix that a little bit before the men teed off. But, I wanted to like it. I really did, because especially you're asking, who knows how many people paid $20, $30, or $40, and it honestly it seemed like Smashbox coverage from like 5 years ago, like when Smashbox was just getting like their groove in live, to where like they were just experimenting with a bunch of stuff, no one had it figured out. That's kind of what it felt like, except for now we're 5 years later and we have this figured out. Mm-hmm. To where like we watched the Inside the Arena middle show, and the graphics were just like, the cuts were so smooth, so much smoother. The graphics, and the audio mixing.
There were still a few issues, but it was much better.
Yeah, everything.
Much less noticeable.
Everything was more refined, and it's because they've been doing it all year.
Right.
So to me, they should have just had the Disc Golf Network do it.
Yeah.
And maybe you make the subscribers pay a little bit extra to get the USDGC coverage, but at least you have a team that's been doing this and knows it. And then when the MPO started, there was a little bit of audio, here and there. The biggest thing was Ian and Philo didn't seem prepared to fill as much time as they needed to fill. Yeah. But that's just...
well, they're taking direction, I think, from their headset.
Yeah, that would be tough.
That's really hard to, like, be able to talk, like, when you're live, hear something, keep carrying a conversation, and, like, also tie in what they're saying. It's a lot at once.
Especially if... I believe this is Ian and Philo's first time doing live commentary. I could be wrong on that. They've done commentary for Central Coast several times before. And I think obviously we're missing the stream right now. I think they will do a great job of the actual commentary part. Yeah. But I think just starting it off, they're a little nervous. But I really hope, and there's also a few picture-in-pictures issues. There's a bunch of like little issues that just added up to make the stream like not
a lot less than
great.
$20 or $30 or $40.
So I'm hoping if by the final day it is refined, we did get a lot of coverage of the chase card. We were getting a lot of disc golf. I will say that.
That's true, yeah.
There was a lot of disc golf. It was good from that aspect. So if by the final day this stuff can be worked out, then next week on the podcast you will get a much happier version of me. But as of right now, and it wasn't just me. I heard several people on Facebook, on our Discord, people were pretty frustrated because you have a little bit of monopoly on this coverage that we all want to see, the only major of the year, and you're asking us to pay a lot more than we've been paying for coverage. So we're going to hold you to a little bit higher standard.
Right.
And unfortunately, the first few hours that standard was not met. Hopefully the remainder of the tournament will be, but it was a little bit disappointing.
To say the least.
Yeah. So FPO side, if you're worried about spoilers, there's your warning. I don't know. I don't think you could be worried about spoilers because, we got 2 weeks until someone who's not paying for live is going to see this coverage.
Right.
I guess someone who pays is going to watch condensed the next day.
Yeah.
Maybe. Paige Pierce went off. I think she has a 5-stroke lead currently. 4-stroke.
10 down to 6 down.
Cat birdied 18. Yeah. But 10 down, popped off first round. Katrina Allen's at 6 down. And then Missy Gannon, I believe, was...
Heather Young.
Heather Young was 3 down. Missy Gannon was even.
Yeah, I think so.
So that's kind of the lead card going into tomorrow.
It's basically Kat's hanging on by a thread.
Yeah,
she's still there. It's not over yet.
The good thing is
Paige looked pretty good.
They're playing. Yeah, Paige looked very, very good.
Yeah.
They are playing pretty much Winthrop. We won't call it Winthrop Golds because some of the tee pads are shorter, but the ropes are up. It's not an easy course. The teeth are still out there.
For sure.
You can't blow up on 17 as much because they do have like a drop zone after the first shot and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of strokes you can lose out there to OB.
Sure.
I believe a player, I won't say their name, a player I believe even took like a 14 on hole 9 because it's an island green.
Yeah.
And you got to just keep going.
Somebody in the MPO did as well. It took a 9 on that hole.
Yeah. So the tournament, even though Paige had an extremely strong first showing, it's not like some of the other tournaments where that immediately makes it over.
Right.
Because even if she had a 4-stroke,
another performance like that tomorrow,
it's over. If she had an 8-stroke with 2 rounds to go, probably. But if Cat is able to, or Missy Gannon goes off, or Heather Young's able to, or someone comes from chase card, if someone's able to stay within 4 or 5 strokes, even going into the final round, the possibility's still there.
Sure.
Now on the MPO side, who do you have taking this thing down? Let's just go top 3. Who is your top 3? On MPO coming into this?
Top 3. I think Paul's gonna win. I know he has to want it really bad, being the only major this year, and I'm probably gonna say Ricky second, Heimberg third.
So I have my top 3 is the exact same but different order. I do think Paul's gonna win. Because like you said, it's the only major of the year. I think he's going to be ready to just come out there. He's going to be ticked off about last year. This is the scene last year where his ankle finally, officially kind of broke, to the point that it's still hurting him this year. Obviously, he's been able to play fine. It's not affecting his play too much. He had to take the brace off because that was affecting his play. But, I think he's going to be very hungry for this title. And when Paul is very hungry, especially when he's playing at a normal Paul level, he's hard to beat.
Yeah.
So I do have Paul winning. I think Calvin is going to be right behind him, though. Calvin has just, he's been on the scene for a while, but this year he's kind of pulled ahead. And actually, I'm going to switch it up. Am I? No, I'm going to put Ricky in third. I was debating on Eagle because Eagle had a very, very strong showing here last year. It was last year he broke his hand, right?
Yes.
I think he was in the lead or in second when he unfortunately punched the ground and broke his hand. But, he's back. He doesn't have anything left over from that. A sidearm naturally plays very well at Winthrop, and he has a very large, big, booming sidearm. So I think he's going to be up there. But I'm not going to put him in my top 3 just because I think Calvin is on a little bit of a hot streak still. And I think that Ricky is also going to be extremely hungry because this time last year he was dealing with Lyme's. This was the start of his Lyme. So I just think there's too many external motivators to where Paul and Ricky are going to be up there. Calvin's just kind of proven he's going to be up there, and I would not surprise me for Eagle to sneak in up there as well.
Sure.
Outside of those players, there's always someone that's shocking at USDGC. That's one of the beauties of the tournament itself. There's always someone that's up there. Could be anyone, but that's my top 3. I'm going to stick with that. I almost snuck Eagle in, but I'll stick with Paul first, Calvin second, Ricky third.
Can't go very wrong with that.
All right, and we're going to head into the final segment of this show. I believe it was USDGC themed. It is USDGC themed, which is Make That Call. So basically what happens is I go into the PDGA rulebook. I find a rule of some sort that I think is interesting, and I see what call Trevor would make, and then let you know and him know if it's the right call. So you're on hole 7 at USDGC. Okay, the bamboo triple mando.
Okay, yes.
One of your card mates throws a backhand, skips through the mando, and then cut rolls back to where he's up against the mando. Okay, he's a little bit off of it, but he's up against the mando. In order for him to feel like he can get a good stance and a good putt, he decides to hold on to the bamboo structure as he throws his disc. Is that legal?
Okay. I've heard of this rule before. I'm trying to remember the exact wording. Okay, so he's through the mando. Where is he leaning?
He came through the mando, skipped, rolled back. He's
leaning against the back of the wall.
He's not leaning against it. He's just pinched up against it. So in order for him to stand where he's comfortable, he decides to hold on to the wall so that he can get a good.
So basically, he's using
the bamboo wall to support himself.
Right. Okay. Putt. So I'm only wondering if there is a difference between it being a man-made structure or just using a tree in the woods, because I've definitely seen it where you're able to use, as long as you're not using it to I know you can't fall forward and hold on to something to catch your balance, but I think if you're doing it if you're holding onto a tree, I've seen that, and I've seen that be legal before. So I want to say, and that object is technically inbounds that he's holding on to, I'm going to say yes, he's able to hold on to it.
Correct. So this is actually from the USDGC
what is the exact rule?
handbook. It says yes, but only if the bamboo is farther from the hole than the lie.
Ooh, interesting.
Also, well, because you can't support yourself in front. So that's kind of what you were saying.
Right,
you can't fall forward. Yeah. But yeah, you could in theory, if your hand's behind and you're holding on, you could have your front foot leaning in front as long as you don't put it on the ground.
Because I've seen guys, hang forward because they have to whether they're leaning out over a creek or whatever it might be. I've seen that before.
Yeah, so you can support yourself with something behind it if you're holding on.
I've never tried it.
It looks so illegal.
Yeah.
The reason I knew it was legal was I saw it was someone it was a European tournament, I believe this year, and someone held onto the sign behind him, a sponsorship sign to support himself as he leaned forward, and I was like, that's illegal. And I was sitting next to Paul, and Paul's like, no, it's not. And I was like,
it's a weird one. I've seen that a couple times.
But here's another thing in it that I honestly couldn't. So they said also player must demonstrate fully controlled balance per 806.01b if the line's within the circle. So basically, if they're in the circle, they can't fall forward. That's not the weird part. I don't know. I couldn't find this in the PDGA rulebook, but I feel like this is in the PDGA rulebook, and it's in the USDGC caddy book, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's in the rulebook. But it's in the caddy book. Players are also allowed 1 meter of relief perpendicular to the mandatory line closer to the target after having passed correctly through the mando. I couldn't find that in the PDGA rulebook, but I feel like that's just a normal rule that the mandatory line you can almost treat as an OB line. So if you're up against it, you could take a meter relief off. That's true in the USDGC.
Does it say no closer to the basket?
No, it says towards the basket.
So you can
mandatory line closer to the target.
You can do that with OB as well.
Yeah. I couldn't find it in the PDGA rulebook. I might have been searching the wrong terms.
Well, it's a bit of a unique mandatory, because normally you wouldn't have to do that, but it's because the mandatory is literally a wall.
Yeah.
Because normally mandatory is a tree, so it's not.
But
really
the line might be to the right of it, so you could take a meter in. I don't know. If someone is able in the comments, whether you just know it or you're able to find the rule and quote it, I'd be very interested to hear that.
If you were leaned up against that wall, like you would almost need it.
Yeah, but if there's a Mando close to a basket somewhere, that could be a very helpful rule to know. It's like, I get a meter off of this.
Sure. Yeah, interesting.
I feel like I've heard it before. It might have just been in this scenario previously reading the caddy book. But if you know the rule, and that is a rule, please comment it down below. And other than that, guys, that is going to wrap it up for this week's episode of Grip Locked. Hopefully you enjoyed. Be sure if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, leave a review over there. We have 120-something reviews, I believe. Let's get that number up to 150 or even 200 reviews. Just let us know what you like, what you dislike. We read every single one of them. If you also want to leave your feedback and you listen to this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever, feel free to tweet at us at FoundationDG or message us on Instagram, Discord, anywhere like that to give us your feedback. Or if you're on YouTube, just comment it right down below. We read all of those as well and try to engage with them when pertinent on top of that. Mm-hmm. So I think that's going to be it. No big Foundation news as of yet, but be sure to tune into our social medias because there are some things coming in pretty soon that we're excited about and can't wait to show you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, we will talk to you guys next week.